Welcome to In the News with Double O Des. I'm Des Bernardo, giving you my perspective on news from South Africa and the rest of the world. In the news now, in true political style, our President Cyril Ramaphosa has created another crisis. Because things aren't going the way they had planned with regards to the coronavirus crisis, a new crisis, a gender-based violence crisis, has now emerged. And most of his speech actually boiled down to this at the end. Now, this is something that the country's been complaining about for a very, very long time. But for a politician to listen, there needs to be an opportunity. There also needs to be a way out of a coronavirus pandemic when things don't look good for your side of the camp. And to briefly summarize the speech, for those of you who said that you can't stomach to actually listen to it, this is the first time that I actually listened to one of his speeches because I felt exactly the same as many of you. So he first bragged about this new drug that's manufactured in South Africa that an Oxford study found to be effective against treating people that are already very close to death, that are on oxygen, or that are actually on ventilators. So people that are really struggling in intensive care. And this drug, in the tests that they've done in the UK, as I've said in the earlier article, proves to be very effective in 1/3 of the patients. Now, you know, for those of you that watched the earlier video will know that in many cases, especially with people on ventilators, only 1 in 25 actually survives because of this drug. So it's only about 4% effective. So I don't know whether one can call that extremely effective, but this is the news that he started out with. There's a reason for this. Somehow someone wanted him to mention this, so either for money or for some kind of impetus coming from the president. Why would he mention just one specific drug when I know that many are on trial at this stage? Interesting, and maybe we'll get to the bottom of this. But if you watch my other video that I did on this, then I give a bit more information. He spoke about South Africa acting very early to flatten the curve to stop international travel into the country. This is absolute rubbish. If we had stopped things earlier, when we knew that there could be problems, we could have changed things completely. We would have not been in the situation of lockdown, and we could do what he is actually talking about now. Now, this is his first speech that I can say was not written by an international concern. Okay? He was told that certain things needed to be included in the speech, whoever his speechwriter was, but this was a political speech. And I've been telling you since Monday that they're going to go over to politics because there's local government elections next year. So he needs to save face now as a politician and as the leader of the ANC, because he still fulfills that role, as crazy as it might seem, that a leader of a party can also be the leader of a country. So he said that we were very effective. Most African countries were effective. He spoke about the doubling time of the infections of the virus. Now, at least he got this right, because he's not talking about COVID anymore. He's speaking about the viral infections. Now, this is the correct term to use, and I thank him for that, finally. So the doubling time, he says initially there were 2 days doubling time, and during level 5 of lockdown, it went to 15 days of doubling time, which is a massive, massive shift and change, okay? So he believed that the lockdown was very effective. Then he spoke about 100 quarantine centers that have been set up. Now we know that the High Court has found these quarantine centers to be unconstitutional. So I have no idea why he mentioned this when this was actually a huge waste of our taxpayers' money. And we were told that you cannot, if someone can self-isolate at home, force that person into a quarantine center, as we saw 2 doctors being forced into a quarantine center in Limpopo. I actually covered the story at the time and it was absolutely shocking. He spoke about the Western Cape, which has 60% of the cases in the country, and he says that this higher infection rate is spreading to the Eastern Cape. It's because so many people from the Western Cape travel to the Eastern Cape over Easter weekend, etc. So it's to be expected. He encouraged the wearing of masks, saying that he knows that it can stop the spread and there's scientific proof of this. He's talking absolute rubbish. What scientific proof? This virus can travel through a piece of porcelain. There's no way that this mask is going to stop you from getting the virus. All it might stop is droplets of spit from flying out of your mouth. So there's no evidence for that, and there's so many people coming out now and saying that that's just a token thing to do, to say that you respect other people. No medical efficacy at all, and most people end up contaminating themselves by touching their faces when they touch the mask. Then he gave a long speech on how we need to clean ourselves, something that he should get a medical professional to do. He said how important social distancing is, how it's our new normal. This narrative is being pushed a lot, the new normal, how things are going to be in future, as if this will never go away. Okay? Just like we got used to the flu and just live with it, with people dying all the time, for some reason with this, people won't just accept it according to them and just carry on with their lives. Somehow we are going to be different forever because of this. Not as if the flu has changed us, because we actually lose tens of thousands of people from that every single year. He specifically said that spray tunnels are ineffective. So he said that they shouldn't be used. Now I know of many companies that have manufactured these spray tunnels, especially in South Africa, and the president has just gone and taken them out of business, literally. Now I've thought that these spray tunnels are absolutely absurd. Walking through something and spraying it all over your body, your face, you're breathing it in, absolute madness. I think all of this alcohol sprays that you're getting on your hands in every shop that you're walking into, I mean, you're drunk by the end of the day at the rate that they're going on. Taking personal responsibility for your health. Now, this was interesting. This was the first time he started talking sense. In other words, just encouraging people to follow normal good hygiene practices, which is something he should have just done from the beginning. And people could have done that everywhere, and we could have been spared the trauma of what happened to the people in the country. Then he said that we will focus on hotspots specifically. Hotspots, especially the metros within the country, and there will be special task teams to look after the hotspots. Well, like I said today, I saw a special team of metro officers sitting in a park with a double cab bakkie engine running for longer than half an hour, watching to see if someone's going to walk into the park. This is their extra efforts. He said that there's a massive increase in screening. Now he said this will happen at churches, at taxi ranks, everywhere. People will be screened. Now we know that screening is pointless unless you already show symptoms of developing the disease, in which case you could have contaminated so many other people. To me it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, based on what we know now. Initially it might have made sense, but now no more sense. He said that there needs to be more targeted testing now. So to actually test for the virus, and I covered this in another video today, he's saying it needs to be targeted. It needs to be for medical health staff, exactly as I said that this professor from Stellenbosch University, head of the virology department, has said that this nonsense that we need to test people before they go back to work. Even if they had developed COVID-19 or they've been on oxygen, after a 2-week period, they should be fine to go back to work, no testing required. And Cyril seems to now, for the first time, they are listening to the MAC team. This is a good thing. This is definitely a shift, and it's happening because of politics, for no other reason. These people need to be re-elected, and they're starting to panic now. Then he spoke about something that's very concerning, and this is with regards to everything I've spoken to you about, especially the New World Order ideology. He started speaking as the head of the African Union. When he is addressing us as our president, how dare he speak as the head of the African Union? And saying that we, as the head of the African Union, we are battling to get our medical supplies, and they've established the African Medical Supply Portal. And this portal will in future be used to distribute medical supplies all over Africa. He is our president. You look after us first. Can you comprehend that? That is what you are being paid for, even although you're a billionaire already. You're being paid to look after our interest. You're a globalist and you're a New World Order stooge. That's what you are. And you are looking out for African interests because you want to be the African leader of the New World Order government when that one world government is established. And I've mentioned this before in my Cyril Ramaphosa video, but here he's giving us clear evidence of where his allegiances actually lie. Then he spoke about the financial crisis. Now, he created the financial crisis in this country. He is responsible for it as the president of the country. He said, we expected you to remain at home for 83 days now, that many of you haven't had any income during this time, and that you are suffering. Whoopie-ki-yay. What have you been doing? Eating caviar? Well, we have nothing. Really. It's easy to say something when you read it off a teleprompter written by someone else. But to actually feel something, I don't believe you. So he said that many businesses were shut down, that people haven't had salaries for up to 80 days. A whole sob story started that moved into his new crisis to distract us away. And this is going to be driven now in the mainstream media like you cannot believe. This is now the new narrative, gender-based violence, and we'll get there just now. So a long sob story before he gets to the little bit of news that everyone has actually been waiting for, okay? He said that the 500 billion relief has not been enough to take care of everyone. Well, he could have calculated that then. It wasn't rocket science. I did maths in my head and I could see that it's impossible to look after the people with that amount of money. Now, let's get to advanced level 3, which I covered in the video just before this one. He specified that restaurants will be open, sit-down restaurants. He didn't mention the 70%. He said accredited accommodation will be allowed, but no Airbnb. So no sharing type thing will be allowed. Still no visits to family or friends or crossing borders, anything like that allowed. Conferences for businesses will be allowed. Now, this should help some of the sound and lighting companies and people that supply conferencing facilities to actually get going again. So it's going to be interesting how that works, because that's not full-on entertainment industry, but many people in the industry that I have a business in would be able to get going with conferencing and give AV facilities for conferences like that. And those are conferences for businesses. So he's specifically looking at conferences needed for businesses to function. Then cinemas and theaters, which I found very interesting, that cinemas and theaters will be allowed. He did not speak about capacities, and he also said that they will specify what the dates will be, and this will probably follow tomorrow in an interministerial briefing, that there will be specific dates and what the requirements will be that they need to meet to actually start with these businesses again. Hairdressers, in other words, personal care, any personal care will be able to open again. Again, they will say tomorrow when that will be allowed, but I believe it will be immediately. Non-contact sport like cricket, tennis and so on will be allowed with matches. He said nothing about the crowds. So once again, we'll have to wait till tomorrow and I'll cover that with you. He said there will have to be strict protocols, of course, and then with contact sports, practices only, no matches allowed. And then we are waiting the announcement for dates. Then he said that we're working with many international agencies on this pandemic. And the one thing that I actually wrote down in my notes is that he looks extremely tired. I mean, this man is knackered. I think he's had it. He's sick and tired of this lot and he wants out. He wants to focus on something else now. And I think this gender-based violence thing is, in his mind, his ticket out of this nonsense right now. So he speaks of a combined African response to COVID-19. So he admits that South Africa is working with international agencies, not with our own people. Okay? But for the first time, they've obviously taken some of the advice of the MAC group of people, the Ministerial Advisory Committee. And he said it's very important to open personnel care services, hairdressers, etc. He said that many of these businesses are self-owned, many of them are women, and this will make them independent financially. But they haven't had business for over 80 days. What are you going to do about that? Why do you think it was okay to do what you did? Why couldn't he say from the beginning that the exact same things should apply now, then, that they're going to apply now? And why couldn't the people carry on working? Why? He has no answers for that, by the way. None. And then he starts his very long sob story, and an important sob story, but I'm referring to him trying to save face and get out of this pandemic by creating this new pandemic that's been there all along. It's been there forever. I actually spoke to someone yesterday that has organized marches with regards to this. And I thank her for the work that she does. So he speaks of killing of women and children and the war that men has started on women and children. And this led, and he actually mentioned some of their names. So he became very emotionally attached. And I think this is a very good way to win over most middle-class women. And he knows that he lost their liking after initially they cast him as a superhero. Okay, so now I see through these sob stories. I know how these politicians work, and I am not going to get emotional for him because he has let these people down. Last year at Parliament, when he spoke to them, he promised all sorts of things. He says he's going to give 1.6 billion and all the rest, and now he knows there's another march coming up now. And then he has to face those same women again. So the rest of his speech was all about this to the end. Nothing about tobacco or anything like that. Sorry to say, my previous videos stand, and I don't know when the ruling will actually be released. But I can tell you now that he couldn't care less about any of you. So he mentions certain women's names, even their ages, what happened to them. And he announced the GBV, 1.6 billion funds made available, that there's a national strategic plan, there's a hotline, shelters that were created, and centers. Now, I don't know, it's easy to say these words. Are they actually effective? Will what they're putting into place actually work? Or is it just lip service? You know, lip service is a very common thing for our politicians. He said police went for sensitivity training. How well did that work for us over the lockdown period? How sensitive were they to women and children, throwing them into the back of police vans when they walk onto the beach? Please, man, you're making a fool of yourself, really. He was speaking about the sentences for these people that commit GBV crimes, that they should get long sentences, and that he trusts the criminal justice system, that it will put them away for long periods of time, that they won't get any parole. Then he started speaking about alcohol, and he spent quite a bit of time on alcohol, and that it was clear that when we went to level 3 of lockdown, when alcohol became available, that violence went through the roof, according to him, and a lot of people were killed. Now, I'm sure that this is the case, because alcohol is a problem. And for the first time, he started talking about more regulation. So, looking into regulations, which is nothing wrong with. You should regulate things. And people that don't know how to consume alcohol without getting out of hand. I 100% support that. And for the first time, he said that we need to look at people with problems and solve the problem. Now, why didn't you do that in the first place? Why did you ban it? Because you're lazy in taking proper steps and actions. That's why. It's easier to put blanket bans on things, just like on the cigarettes. It's the easiest thing to do. So he's talking about rehabilitation centers and treatment for alcoholics. And he was talking about car accidents that were caused as well because of that. And my final statement is, gender-based violence is his way out of the COVID mess that he's created. And he called it this, that there's two pandemics all of a sudden. Very, very important that he actually equated them. that they're at the same level. Didn't say one is worse than the other. He said there's two pandemics, and this is the new one that we need to fight. So this is Cyril's speech in a nutshell. There's nothing else. I took the most important things from that speech. So what I covered in my previous video would already, besides for cinemas and so on, tomorrow we'll know in detail exactly which businesses would be involved. He didn't mention massage parlors or tattoo bars, but I know in the previous article that I covered that they were specifically mentioned. And tomorrow we will get all of those details from the Interministerial Committee, and I will make a summary of who of you can go back to work, how you're going to have to do that, where you can find the information, so we can get this country back to work. And then we can figure out how we're going to get rid of these idiots in government. Thank you very much.